Anthony, thank you very much for this session. So we'll take some questions now. You can use the Q&A feature on the webinar, or you can post your questions in the webinar chat. I have a few questions, Anthony. So as a team, or let's say as a product manager, how can we build a culture of security within our product management, our product development team? Yeah.
So that's a big question, and the thing is, it can't be localized. It's something that needs to start all the way up to senior management. When you say culture, the culture has to start from the top down. So these decisions about how you integrate or include security into your design or into the early stages of your product needs to be made. Those decisions need to be made up at the top, and that needs to trickle down and be present in everything that you do in terms of product development.
Okay, so let's assume a product is already under development. What measures can we put in place to include security for the remaining development cycle? We couldn't start with, so we are building a product. I mean, this
is where, I think it's important to engage with a security team. Now, the question normally it's there's, do you have a security team in place internally? Sometimes you may not have that security team internally, right? So then my recommendation then would be to engage with a partner, a security partner that then can help partner with you through the rest of that process. I mean, I think the biggest problem is just identifying the fact that you need to include them. All right, that's the first step, is to ensure that you do include security as soon as you possibly can, even if you've already started that process. The security teams or partners will then be able to go in. Now they'll want to go. The reason why some teams don't like to engage with security is because they feel like they're going to take them backwards and potentially start over again, which could happen. It could happen because it may be that they see something that it just doesn't look right, and they might need to be rectified. Now, security teams, they have your best interest in mind, in that they want to make sure that you deliver a secure product. They're not there to just hold you back and try to stall the process. So it can be very tricky engaging with a team, but and that's why we say to try to do it as early as possible, so that security teams are aware of the design decision. They can question those design decisions a little bit earlier on, so that no mistakes happen that early on in that stage.
Okay, right. Augustine, I saw your hand up. I'm not too sure if you can ask the question audio, so maybe you can post your question in the Q&A. Oh, okay, you have the question there. Please, are we going to receive the slides? Anthony, are you going to make the slides available to us?
I will make the slides available to you, yes, Carlos, and however you decide to disseminate them is up to you.
Okay. Okay, so my next question, what would you say are some of the most effective security testing techniques for a product that is being developed, and how can they be implemented, or how can we implement them?
Yeah, there are different ways of doing security testing, and it depends. It always depends, right? It always depends. The three that really stick out in my mind is, one is source code review, right? Being able to look at the source code in its raw form, and this is something that normally a security team would not necessarily have access to, due to a variety of things. It could be proprietary codes, intellectual property, things of that nature. But being able to look through that through not just static analysis tools, but also dynamic analysis tools to kind of look through that code to look for common vulnerabilities. You also have vulnerability scanning, which is tools that look for known signatures. So the signatures have already been built, and the tools will go and look for those signatures to see if your product has those vulnerabilities. So it's usually a bit more automated. And then you have penetration testing, and penetration testing can be both automated and manual as well. But penetration testing is more about validating those vulnerabilities. So if a vulnerability tool highlights a vulnerability, it might not necessarily be it could be a false positive, but you don't know. Vulnerability scanner is just going to highlight that for you. So what you want to do in penetration testing is actually go and validate that. So you'll use the various techniques to try to, depending on the vulnerability, to try to validate whether or not that is or is not about a valid vulnerability.
Okay. Okay. There's a question in the Q&A. Okay, there are two questions. Let's take the one from Harrison. Harrison says, you mentioned technologies like IoT, AI, and others that has a high vulnerability to security attack. What do you suggest can be done to reduce the vulnerability?
Yeah, so this, the recurring theme throughout the presentation is always about getting security involved early in the design. I think with IoT, the problem with IoT at the very beginning, now it's getting better, thankfully, but at the very beginning, and I think this is with any product really, is that security is an afterthought. Security, it's about getting that functionality out to the user. And I think that's what companies were more interested in doing, was not missing that window of opportunity to get a product out there in the hands of the consumers. So, you know, when you have a time crunch and you have a budget, you know, things start to have to give. And security was one of those things. But I think a lot of products, I mean, if you probably go back to the early doors of Microsoft, you know, very early on, you know, it's like how many patching and updating did you have to do on a regular basis with Windows, you know, through the early stages of that product. There's still some issues, but they're not as bad as it used to be. So, you know, what can we do to reduce that is get security thinking, security design, all of that early on in the design, that it should be incorporated, it should be part of. And when we go back to culture, when you talked about culture, Carlos, this is a big thing. Everybody needs to be on the same page, be thinking the same way in terms of security, right? Security is a good thing, and it's going to help you protect you from a lot of different things. So, so that would be my suggestion there, is just to get the security, you know, going earlier on in that design stage.
Great. One more question. Pabna says, what is quantum computing?
Quantum computing. it's I don't know if I can describe it properly. It's just a new technology using being able to use quantum mechanics to compute. You know, it's got high processing power, much more than what we have today. I can't really go into too much because I don't know it in depth myself, but this is one of the trends that a lot of people are getting nervous about, because it has the potential to crack cryptographic algorithms in a very, very short period of time. So the way that cryptographic systems are being developed are to be able to sustain or resist attacks for a number of years, let's say 10 or 15 years. And as computing gets better and better and faster, they have to come back and either develop new algorithms or, you know, change the current algorithms to kind of resist those attacks. So just to try to keep 10 to 15 years ahead of the potential of high compute. And quantum mechanics is supposed to break that mold, that they'll be able to solve or crack cryptographic algorithms in minutes, and that's the scary thing. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on if you're doing anything with cryptography.
Okay, cool. Franklin says, what is the, okay, he has three in one actually. What is the best tool for continuous integrated security test? Would you like to take them one by one?
Continuous integrated security test. So that gets into a little bit of DevOps and automation. I can't speak to any tools in particular. So unfortunately, I can't help out with that question. The best practices for security test. Again, this will go back to what I mentioned earlier. It really depends on a few things here. What are the requirements requiring legislation and compliance? What is the company expecting to get out of security testing? What are the consumers or the users of that product want to get out of security testing? But you have different things. You have code review, which is a little bit more intimate and a little bit more in depth. If a company is willing to supply that source code, sometimes that's not the case. There is also vulnerability scanning, which you can do continuously. Vulnerability scanning is something, and there are products there. I think Nessus has a kind of a continuous vulnerability scanning tool that will just continuously look at your products and highlight anything that is new. But be careful with vulnerability scanning. It does scan very quickly. It is automated, but sometimes can lead to false positives. And this is where penetration testing comes in. I believe penetration testing can help validate those things that are highlighted by vulnerability scanners, and also probably do more than a vulnerability scanner can do, because a pen tester would be able to go a little bit more in depth and do a few more things that a vulnerability scanner couldn't do. Can you do 100% security test? No. No, I do not believe there's anything, any such thing as 100% security test. And just to prove that point, when you watch the headlines and you see the headlines say something about 0-day, okay, 0-day means a 0-day exploit or a 0-day compromise means that there is no known patch for that vulnerability. It means that somebody has found something that nobody else has found. So, and this happens on a regular basis. In just the last 3 months, there have been probably 8 high-profile data breaches, and a few of them involved 0 days, meaning that somebody found a bug or vulnerability in a piece of software or an application that nobody else knew about or was aware of, and therefore there's no patch to it. So security has to be continuous, and well, let's put it this way: it has to be continuous. Hence, there's no such thing as 100% security testing.
Okay.